Papua New Guinea and welcome to another episode of Business PNG. Rice company Trukai Industries will be buying rice from local farmers in the Oro Province. Sombere village in the Sohe district is set to ship its rice to Leh for Trukai to process in its systems ready to supply a dedicated consumer market.
According to the report Rice Demand in Papua New Guinea by John Gibson, importing rice is one of the most contentious food policy issues in Papua New Guinea. For at least 2 decades, politicians and other commentators have suggested that the local population is becoming too reliant on imported rice. Prompted by these concerns, the early 1990s saw policymakers set ambitious targets for local rice production of approximately 50,000 tons by the end of the decade to provide 40% of national requirements. And just last year, Agriculture Minister Tommy Tomskol told rice companies to start investing and producing rice in-country. The government's new national rice policy focuses on local rice farming, reducing imports and enhancing food security, but the country's dominant rice player has had similar plans for some time. Recently in Sombere village, Sohe, Oro farmers prepared a harvest to be sent to Leh for Trukai, the country's dominant rice producer. Trukai Industries chairman Mark Robertson and sister company Sunrise chairman Laurie Arthur inspected the rice before it was shipped to Leh.
It'll put money directly in the pockets of our people. What I'm trying to do, or my government would like to do, is to encourage the next level. Okay, they will be farmers that need to purchase equipment and things. So I'd like to encourage other people in the province, and we want to develop SMEs.
500 rice farmers that make up the Oro Rice Growers Cooperative initially agreed to supply Trukai with over 2,000 tons per year, but that agreement is expected to change when more farmers get involved. CEO for Trukai Greg Worthington Eyre says a rice development purchasing agreement similar to that of West New Britain, Central and Morobe is in discussions for Oro farmers.
Down the track, the commercial agreement, so it's could be around the $300 a tonne, minus some costs. Okay, still quite lucrative for the farmers, but it will depend on how successful they are in managing the crop through the growing cycle.
Places mentioned by Mr. Worthington Eyre to have produced quality yields include Magabaira in the Central Province, where the company has purchased 4 hectares of rice, getting an average of 5 tons per hectare. Trukai is also pledging its support towards the national government's agenda of nationwide food security during the dry spell that hits the country.
We need to continue to develop them. We need to be cost effective. We need to increase the volumes that are coming out, and we need to be able to maintain quality of the rice so that it is usable in our market. But you know, to get it being grown and coming back in is definitely encouraging.
Since 1990, Papua New Guinea imports over 150,000 tons of rice. And if farmers do well, the country can become an exporter.
The real estate industry, to regulate or not to regulate, that is the question. The Independent Consumer and Competition Commission finally addressed the issue of unrealistic rental prices of residential properties, especially with PNG's fast-growing middle class. However, there are those who oppose the regulation of the real estate industry, claiming that it would curb investment interests. Business PNG had the opportunity to speak to ICCC Commissioner Paulus Ayn on the topic, who also made clear where ICCC stands was as a regulatory entity. Over the past 3 decades, the PNG government has undertaken initiatives to address the shortage of affordable accommodation through the commissioning of 3 task force reports. The first initiative was undertaken in 1978 when the Morgan Committee was tasked to recommend means of increasing the supply of affordable housing. This was followed by a report from the National Housing Task Force in 2007 and the ICCC report of 2010. All 3 reports proposed effective strategies to increase the supply of affordable houses in the country. The key recommendations from each of the reports have yet to be implemented.
Currently, there is an acute shortage of housing and formal affordable accommodation in urban across Papua New Guinea. This is largely due to expansion of urban population over the past 3 decades and failure of the affordable housing market to cater for housing needs of the growing population. The problem is really worse now. The main cause of the high rental and houses prices are mainly caused by high cost of land, building materials, building design costs, labor costs, insurance costs, stamp duty costs, basic infrastructure such as houses, sewage, power, and other basic infrastructure. This all amount to increase in cost of purchasing a house or renting a house. The limited supply of affordable houses, which has then inflated the housing prices and rentals.
The report by the National Housing Task Force also relied on the successful implementation of the recommendations in the National Land Development Task Force report that was completed in 2006. The NLDT report proposed strategies to increase the supply of land for development, including new housing developments. Like the other three reports, most of the recommendations have yet to be implemented.
Therefore, high rental houses or prices are not only caused by limited supply, but are largely generally reflecting the high cost of bringing a formal house into the market. The high cost of land is mainly attributed to the limited supply of land in the country. The high cost of land can only be addressed by bringing more land into the formal market for housing developments. This was one of the recommendations in the report from the Land Development Task Force, which is still to be implemented. Bringing more land into the market, more houses can be built, subsequently lower rentals and lower housing price. The high cost of construction can be addressed through the various recommendations that were proposed in the Housing and Real Estate report by the ICCC. The strategy are now to deliver more houses into market efficiently were proposed in the National Housing Strategy, and these are currently not implemented.
In 2010, the National Urbanization Policy was developed outlining the vision for PNG towns and cities for the time frame of 2010 to 2030, the urban issues and challenges to be faced, and the directions to be followed to address these challenges. Shortage of land and affordable accommodation in the urban areas were also identified in this policy, and strategies were outlined to address these problems. However, some of the goals in this policy will only be achieved if the recommendations in the National Development Task Force report are implemented, as land is needed for urban expansion, including new housing developments.
On the way forward for the ICCC, apart from all these policy interventions and policy directions over 3 decades, ICCC is considering a regulatory intervention. A regulatory intervention is now currently we are considering, so we will now be putting a report back to government. If policy interventions are failing, then regulatory intervention would be considered. And steps are now taken, and we will inform the general public as soon as the appropriate regulatory form of regulation is considered, we will inform.
Welcome back. The Morobe provincial government is digging deep into its internal revenue to pay for services and new infrastructure. Budget cuts and decisions from the national government have caused ripples affecting lay businesses and ultimately service delivery. Morobe Governor Naru has warned of turbulent times ahead. Bethany Hariman with this report from Lay.
The slump in the world commodity prices and decisions made by the national government on the country's budget, loans taken and how money is being spent is hitting the Morobe Province hard as the provincial government digs deep into its own pocket to pay for services and new infrastructure. On the 4th of this month, the provincial government launched a 5 million kina upgrading of the Wagang Road, a vital upgrade for the planned Wagang Wharf and Lay's 5 multi-million kina tuna canneries. Morobe Governor Naru, who is also the provincial finance chairman, says projects are now being paid for with internal revenue,
which we are using to embark on this major impact project, which is essentially going to service the new wharf facility and also the villagers living along this route.
The 55 million kina nationwide funding cut to health centers run by churches is also having its effects. Morobe's health services are mostly run by churches.
We are doing what we can from our own internal churches partnership program, but that we can only stretch so far.
To fully understand the extent of the budget cuts affecting health services in the Morobe Province, Bowana in Nawai district is an example. Guambot Health Center in Bowana is only getting monetary support worth 10,000 kina for its new health program from the district administration.
Now long display day, me almost through long looking one plug commitment. Me also member belong you, make him long display 8 post, 10,000 long make him improvement completing project
Morobean politicians have been quite subtle about their spending on service delivery during public gatherings, and they've spelled out money crisis.
Papua New Guinea is running out of cash. Government money.
On Thursday in Bowana, the head of the province in a speech explained that the provincial government has limited funding and can only do so much.
Consistency in funding, consistency in delivery of funds to the relevant agencies, and they then disperse that to their relevant institutions. That's the problem. But what we are seeing now is government basically adopting an ad hoc approach, give one time, take away another time, and so on.
The problem of limited funding stems from decisions made in Waigani because world commodity prices have slumped and the economy is sliding. Rural areas around the country like Bowana are feeling the pinch. Though Bowana boasts the best health service delivery in the Morobe Province, it is still struggling.
People like Marasen must supply to all must think health center resource plum plus santin. Osemol Malawan or Dislaino big platomas. Lord Nambi site good plaolka planting mosquito na Lord Mountain emosem place call na all picnic sakisi pneumonia or sotwin emos a place call osena. Mean like emos a supply blow marasen blow disla mas come good save multiple people.
Bowana is still dealing with high infant and maternal mortality cases, and the availability of medicine in its clinics is limited. The funding to pay for the medicine, health, education and infrastructure developments comes from Lay's business activities. Much of the funding that contributes to Morobe's internal revenue comes from tax paid by businesses operating in Lay. Morobe's internal revenue is estimated at around 111 million kina for this year. But like all budget forecasts, that amount depends on how efficient the provincial administration collects its tax and if all businesses, including the small ones, pay their tax. But there is another problem that is greatly affecting internal revenue: the low supply of foreign currency in banks. As a manufacturing hub, businesses in Lay are struggling to operate and generate the kind of cash flow enjoyed in the past. Governor Naru has already warned the province to prepare for turbulent times ahead.
The only way to fix it at this point is to refloat the currency. Now overnight, that's going to cause a lot of pain. The value of the kina will drop, there's no doubt. And in the short term, there'll be a lot of pain. But in the long term, there'll be a lot more liquidity in the economy. It'll make exports a lot more competitive, whether it's fisheries, agriculture or anything else.
But because of restrictions placed by the central bank on who gets foreign currency, some businesses' operations are being affected. Michael Kingston, KK Kingston's chief executive officer, runs one of Papua New Guinea's oldest manufacturing company, started by his father Keith in the early 1970s. He has pleaded with the national government and suggested alternatives.
But most importantly, it'll allow business to continue as normal. And right now, it's like trying to run through honey. It's nearly impossible because you just can't get the money to pay your suppliers. So I plead with the government. We have to do something about this foreign exchange crisis.
Launched last December in Kainantu in the Eastern Highlands Province, Ramu 2 is a major infrastructure project being managed by Kumul Consolidated Holdings and is expected to increase total electricity generation capacity in Papua New Guinea by 36%. KCH has focused on Phase 1 of a 3-phase transaction management process, seeking expressions of interest from suitably qualified development partners to develop the project and operate under a public-private partnership model.
We've asked for expressions of interest and proposals from various leading companies all over the world to try and involve themselves in the proposed Ramu 2 hydro project, and more than 50 companies have expressed interest, and that is a very good sign of the fact that despite what is happening here, Papua New Guinea is still regarded as a good place where people can do business and invest. So that is what has happened. After having gone through the screening process, the evaluation committee has come up with 3 companies on the short list. First is a consortium of Korean companies who are obviously experienced in this business, and then 2 companies from China. And what will happen now is that our team will then go through an extensive, exhaustive process of dealing with the financials, environmental issues, the structure, and those sort of things that are necessary to bring a project of this magnitude forward. And then hopefully, once the final proponent has been selected, then early next year, construction will commence. Once we're able to come up with a successful bidder or proponent.
A total of 65 proponents responded to the tender, and ultimately 3 companies were selected for the development of the project. These are Korean consortium POSCO Daewoo, Korean Western Power, Dailim Energy, Hyundai Engineering, from China Sino Hydro Corporation Limited, and Shenzhen Energy Group Company, also from China. Kumul Consolidated Holdings is also in the process of completing a feasibility study on the area and surroundings, including a complete social mapping, awareness delivery, environmental and social impact studies, and mobilizing landowners to cooperate so that they can participate in the PPP model.
As part of the feasibility study, we've got the report that is available. We will provide that report to the 3 shortlisted proponents that were announced today. The work that we are doing now on site, insofar as environmental issues are concerned, we have our consultants on site. They've been up there for the last 5 weeks. We hope to have a baseline study report ready in 6 weeks' time. Yeah. So that report will basically outline the current state, environmental state, and then we need to meet the SIPA requirements on how we manage this project. So after the baseline report, we will develop an environmental management plan that we will attach it with our application to SIPA.
The launch of the Ramu 2 project is one of 5 recent agreements using renewable energy to supply additional power to PNG.
When the project is in the construction phase, and hopefully at the end of the construction phase, this project will help alleviate some of the problems that we're encountering in the Highland region, as well as Leh and parts of the Momasa region. Papua New Guinea has got an expanding population, so obviously the energy needs ever more increasing. So it's a big challenge for us. In the past, most of our SOEs were caught unprepared. This time around, under the O'Neill government, we'd like to be able to prepare ourselves so that we meet the energy needs of our country.
And that's all from us tonight. For more business news, or if you would like to view this episode again, visit MTV online at the URL at the bottom of the screen. Or for up-to-the-minute business news and updates, like our page on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at BusinessPNG or on Tumblr. Until next week, have a pleasant evening. I'm Michelle Bird, and this was Business PNG.